So the other day I saw a video promoting a news special on PBS. It was entitled, "Watch Young People Respond to Racism in America." The description of the video read like this. Quote, "Teens across the U.S. have responded to the recent conversation around racial injustice and police brutality with fear, hope, and resolve to make lasting change. Their perspective comes as part of PBS NewsHour's Student Reporting Lab's call out for student responses to recent uprisings sparked by the death of George Floyd on May 25th while in police custody." Here's a clip from that video.
"I have 4 younger brothers at home, and I have to explain to them each and every day about being a black man in America."
You never know who you're dealing with. When it comes to police officers, you never know if it's going to be somebody who is going to be understanding and willing to work with you, or if it's going to be someone who basically just has a job and is on a power trip.
As a kid, when a police officer would come, approach me, I wouldn't really feel anything. Now, with all the modern day lynchings, when I see a police officer, I'm scared because I never know what's going to happen because situations escalate quickly.
So when I see a police officer, I am not scared for my life. I'm not scared because I know the color of my skin and I know my race, and I know that there won't be prejudice against me because I am white. I am not scared, but I can't say the same for others, which is a problem.
I am angry for my black friends, family, neighbors, my fellow human beings.
It's not always about the experiences that you do have. It's also about the experiences you don't have. Much like I've never been discriminated against for the color of my skin or my ethnicity. People think I'm white. I've never had someone cross the street to avoid passing me, or have never been followed in a retail store for looking suspicious.
I feel overwhelmed and upset, but at the same time, all of the protests and people backing behind the Black Lives Matter movement is really making me feel hope in our generation and that we can make a change in America.
My goal with all of this is to make this country safer for my kids to live here.
As I listen to the testimonies and very real fears these young people have about living in the United States, I could not help but wonder why anyone would want to move here. If I were an immigrant with the entire world to choose from, would I choose a country filled with racism and systems designed to keep me oppressed? Of course, I wouldn't, which is why so many immigrants, black immigrants in particular, make their way to America. In fact, the number of black immigrants to America has grown exponentially in the past few years. After this, I'm going to share some very interesting statistics with you. Stay tuned. This podcast is brought to you by Black History Quiz because it takes more than a month to learn our history. History is not black and white. It's complicated. America was built on slave labor, yet blacks owned slaves as well. The Republican Party was founded to abolish slavery, but today most blacks vote Democrat. And sometimes, just sometimes, African kings marry white. No matter the race, people are complicated, filled with contradictions, and change with the times. To view history through the lenses of today's culture cheats the learner of the full story. Black History Quiz is a newsletter that shares facts you might not have learned in school and certainly did not learn from mainstream media. Black History Quiz educates, sparks debate, and often puts history. Visit blackhistoryquiz.com and subscribe to the weekly newsletter. No matter your perspective of history, you will not be disappointed. blackhistoryquiz.com. In 2018, NBC News reported that 64% of Americans say racism is a major problem. Here's a quote. A majority of Americans say racism remains a major problem in American society and politics, according to the latest NBC News SurveyMonkey poll. Overall, 64% said racism remains a major problem in our society. 30% agreed that racism exists today, but it isn't a major problem. The poll coincided with an MSNBC town hall airing Tuesday night titled Everyday Racism in America, where hosts Joyanne Reed and Chris Hayes addressed the complex issue of racial bias in America and what can be done to address it. The town hall took place in Philadelphia, where 2 black men were arrested while waiting for someone in a Starbucks last month, prompting days of protests and accusations of racism against the coffee chain. And on the same day, the chain closed 8,000 stores nationwide for racial bias training. If you watched the debates of the Democratic presidential candidates last year, racism was mentioned quite a lot. Listen to this clip to get an idea of how popular the topic was.
We want to turn now to the issue of race in America.
We have got to take on Trump's racism.
We'll call his racism out for what it is.
The racial divide lives within me.
Environmental racism, economic racism, criminal justice racism, healthcare racism.
And racism, or crime or poverty, ended on my watch. But in our city,
that what Trump is doing through his racism,
systemic racism has touched every part of American life.
And segregation and the institutional racism we see now.
President Trump is pursuing a re-election strategy based in part on racial division.
We'll also sign into law Sheila Jackson Lee's reparations bill so that we can have the national conversation we have waited too long in this country to have.
If you did the math of the 40 acres and a mule, given that there was 4 to 5 million slaves at the end of the Civil War, there were 4 to 5, and they were all promised 40 acres and a mule for every family of 4. If you did the math today, it would be trillions of dollars.
White wealth gap in America.
Racial issues.
The racial divide lives within me.
And according to a Pew Research study on Twitter conversations, between January 2015 and March 2016, there were over 30 million Twitter posts about racism. With so much talk about racism in America and the fear of being oppressed in America from racist systems, why would anyone want to immigrate here? A better question, why would black immigrants want to live here? And yet, they come here by the millions and are prospering. Here are some stats from the Pew Research Center. So much information. I do 5 points. Point number 1. The black immigration population has increased 5-fold since 1980. There were 4.2 million black immigrants living in the United States in 2016, up from just 816,000 in 1980, according to a Pew Research analysis of the U.S. Census Bureau data. Since 2000 alone, the number of black immigrants living in the country has risen 71%. Now, roughly 1 in 10 blacks living in the United States are foreign-born, according to the 2016 American Community Survey data. Point number 2. Much of the recent growth in the foreign-born black population has been fueled by African migration. Between 2000 and 2016, the black African immigrant population more than doubled from 574,000 to 1.6 million. Africans now make up 39% of the overall foreign-born black population, up from 24% in 2000. Still, roughly half of all foreign-born blacks living in the United States in 2016 were from the Caribbean, with Jamaica and Haiti being the largest source countries. Point number 3. When compared with other immigrant groups, blacks are more likely to be U.S. citizens or to be proficient English speakers. Roughly 6 in 10 foreign-born blacks are United States citizens, compared with 49% of immigrants overall. And given that many black immigrants are from English-speaking nations, black immigrants ages 5 and older are more likely than the overall immigrant population to be proficient English speakers. Interesting. Point number 4. Overall, black immigrants earn college degrees at a slightly lower rate than Americans in general. But the share of foreign-born blacks from Africa with a college degree is higher than that of the overall U.S. population. About 1/4 of foreign-born blacks ages 25 and older had at least a bachelor's degree in 2013, which falls somewhat below that of the overall U.S. population at 30%. However, black immigrants aged 25 and older from Africa have high levels of educational attainment. 35% have a college degree, a higher share than Americans overall. And here is my final point. There are some distinct differences between United States and foreign-born blacks when it comes to age, education, marriage, and income. Check this out. In comparison with U.S.-born blacks, foreign-born blacks are older, with a median age of 42 versus 29 for U.S.-born blacks, according to 2013 figures. Among those 25 and older, a higher share of immigrant blacks have a bachelor's degree or higher. They're also much more likely to be married. Nearly half of black immigrants aged 18 and older were married in 2013, compared with 28% of U.S.-born blacks, a difference that may be tied to the foreign-born blacks' higher median age. And here's the kicker. Black immigrants are in general faring better economically than blacks born in the United States. Household incomes for foreign-born blacks are on average $10,000 higher than U.S.-born blacks, and black immigrants are less likely to live in poverty. If America is such a racist country as reported in the media, echoed by politicians, and is accepted as a given by the majority of Americans, then why do so many black immigrants, African immigrants in particular, do better than the African Americans who were born here? Maybe, just maybe, the African immigrants were so focused on being successful that it did not allow racism to hold them back. And to be clear, I am not saying that racism does not exist or hamper progress in some way. What I am saying is that in the big scheme of things, when you consider the success of African immigrants, racism really doesn't matter. You have been listening to the Things I Think About podcast. If you love what you heard, hate what you heard, or don't know what you just heard, I want to know about it. Drop me an email. I can be reached at jimstroud, that's JIMSTROUD, @jimstroud.com. So, until next time, bye-bye.